this as a way to do MRSA or staph because of the clinical
This,
trials.
the problem is this is inside of the udder.
Inside
It's
the
not
udder, you can't
contact.
do it.
So you have to do it enterically. And I believe that there is a way to deal with it. I really do. And we've seen some, but it's not really consistent and it's not really proven yet. But we're getting closer. I think within a year and a half, 2 years, we'll be able to treat staph, but Staph aureus, which is pretty bad stuff. Not for humans. It's not a disease for humans, but it's certainly not good for the cow. And it's contagious to the offspring. If the calf drinks it, it can manifest in her udder when she's young. So we got to get staph out of there.
Yeah.
TB is tested by the state every year. Brucellosis is tested. So you've got most of that stuff. So mastitis is generally what you take care of. Any kind of hoof problems, we put them on a hoof rack. We actually trim their hooves, make sure they're clean. We have a bath of copper sulfate that they step on. And they're in pastures. So it's about conditions and it's about really being on it with your team in terms of management of the cow's health. But you generally have fewer problems when you don't confine cows really tightly together and keep them dry.
And I hear that organic farmers, what I've heard, and I don't know if it's true, you can maybe confirm this, but is that organic farmers, when they get a disease on their dairies because they're not allowed to use antibiotics and that kind of stuff, that they send that cow then to a conventional dairy across the street, she gets treated.
And they own both dairies.
Right, and then she's brought back to the organic
They're not
dairy.
supposed to be able to bring them back.
Okay.
They're not supposed to be able to, some of these dairies, and I know a couple of them that do this, called a split operation. They have an organic dairy and the best cows there, and then they kick the cows that need to be treated off their conventional dairy and use them over there for a while, and then they go off to hamburger later. But that's frowned upon. It's not considered very holistic. It's not really answering the question. So what most organic guys do is they actually send their cows to organic beef program. And that's what, because the organic beef program, the cow's worth $2,500 for organic beef, her replacement's only $2,000, so it's actually a profitable program. But the more you cull your herd, the more the genetics are, that in fact you won't have that in the future. So it's actually, over time, you're reducing the amount of culling because your genetic propensity changes. When we started, we had little mastitis, now we have very, very little. I mean, out of 400 cows, we have 3. Nothing. On a regular herd, you got a whole lot, and you're always injecting with today and tomorrow the antibiotics, and it's like rejecting milk samples in the herd and the tankers, the truck tankers. It's just a huge problem, and that's why the dairy community is looking more and more for more of a sustainable practice because the other stuff doesn't work so well. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what I hear you saying is that your operation, the process is being replicated in some parts of the country.
Yes.
My question is it being replicated to the extent that some states which disallow the sales of raw milk are going to turn around or have turned around and are now allowing it?
Let me tell you a little story about Maryland. I was just back there as an expert witness. You know this story? It's interesting. Maryland is where the FDA lives. And the FDA absolutely, passionately hates raw milk. Categorically, absolutely. Hitler, devil incarnate. Raw milk is the worst thing in the world.
Liquid death.
Like 1 drop will kill you today. Okay. And they don't see any other milk in the world except for raw milk intended for pasteurization. That's the only rule they've got. And they are in charge of what's called the NCIMS, the National Conference on Interstate Commerce. And that's where all the big processors stand around. That's the rules for the pasteurized milk ordinance, the PMO. The rules. So the FDA sits at the kingdom, the throne on top of this industrial rulemaking process that rules the processors and interstate commerce and pasteurization. If they ever said anything good about raw milk, it would ruin the processors because the processors don't get to process raw milk. It bypasses them. It goes from farmer to consumer. The processors absolutely got to plant some ugly story someplace in your brain to keep you scared of raw milk because, and the FDA, who mans the FDA? The FDA is manned by industry. It's the revolving door. It's the Food Inc. thing. So the Food Inc. guys say, you've got to plant the worst seeds of doubt in these people's minds, scare them any way you can because we've got to keep our market share. It's about money. And so Maryland is where the FDA lives. Maryland wants raw milk like crazy, but they have to go down to Pennsylvania to get it and bring it in. They're losing millions of dollars a year. They're having ever-shrinking numbers of dairymen who want to produce raw milk but are criminalized by doing so. You can't even have a cow share in Maryland, where other states let you buy a cow. So they barely let the farmer himself drink his own milk, okay? So it's one of those states that's just absolutely in the dark ages. Well, there's been 4 times that a bill has been brought to the legislature in Maryland to change the law. And every time, the committee chairman of the committee that looks at the bill will not let it even go to vote with the committee members. He just puts it without shelf. Because he knows the committee members are ever more becoming enlightened to the fact that, hey, Pennsylvania's doing it, why can't we do it? Why can't we feed ourselves? Well, what was interesting, in this last committee meeting, I went and I testified, I said, we have a normalized raw milk system in America, semi, here in California, semi. 625 stores and thriving, and we have a good set of rules. I don't see why Maryland can't do that, even do it better. Why can't you learn from California and do your own thing? FDA's here, they can really help. And, no. But the bottom line was the committee chairman said, we want to talk to you. And there was separate meetings about, I can't do this, the pressure's too great. And can't we have a working group for like 5 years or something? So that he could actually term out and not be the chairman when the decision was made later. I said, no, maybe 1 year working group, and guess what? Have a little test project where you can actually have raw milk being provided for people in the state and have the working group supervise it, and we'll bring in the very best food safety technology and conditions we know from what we've learned and help you with that working group to understand this and make you really proud of raw milk and make the best possible raw milk in the world right here in Maryland. They are scared to death because success will kill them. So this is a political thing, and I see Maryland as the ultimate prize because it's backdoor of the FDA, baby. That's the way I see it because I have no use for these people. The FDA backs a pharmaceutical industry right now.
Oh, yeah.
Remember where I came from? I was a paramedic for 17 years.
Right.
You dial 911, Mark McAfee came through the door with epinephrine to save your kid who was having an asthma attack, okay? 9 kids a day die in America because of FDA drug management and FDA appropriate Western medical care of asthma. 9 kids every day die in America. That's huge. There's not been one death from raw milk in America in the recorded history of America since 1972 when they started recording it from any raw milk. There's been 2 people recorded as died from imported raw cheeses from Mexico. Yes, there's been about 1,500 to 1,800 illnesses, depending how you look at it in raw milk. But when you look at the millions of people that drink raw milk across the United States, it's irrelevant when you consider that 425 to 430,000 people have been sickened by pasteurized milk. With some of these outbreaks as big as 150,000 people, and there's been 77 deaths from pasteurized milk. So it's not about food safety. It's not about, this is about market and money. And so my biggest thing is, let's prove the market. Let's prove the safety. Let's be beyond reproach. Let's spread the technology we have that can do what we're going to do. Really embrace Mother Nature. Really embrace organics. Understand the conditions that precipitate good outcomes. And show these guys the way it is. And collect the data and publish it. And just don't ever give up. Persevere. And that's what's working. It's working very, very well. And the other side is weakening because, remember, their support is weakening. The fluid milk markets are diving. Not pasteurized cheeses, and they're doing okay. But fluid milk is diving. Raw milk is a fluid milk. So we have a weakening opposition to an ever-strengthening, substantiated position. Now, I would not be able to make this little speech 12 years ago. But I'll even make a greater speech 2 or 3 years from now. So we are rapidly evolving. Kind of think of ourselves as the organic revolution in the 1970s, when Earl Butz said, when you think of organics, think starvation. Now it's national standard. That took 25 years to do that. So, take another 5 years down the road, you're going to see quite an evolution when pasteurized fluid milk is being consumed at 5% of the total volume versus 11% right now. And raw milk is in every state, and everybody's getting it one way or another. And Robbie's got 50 farmers that are listed, and there's big published reviews, and there's better technology. We are in an evolutionary, emerging, changing market right now. And thank God, because our children need it desperately, because the immune system status is so decimated in America. So we're back to connecting to your farmers, eating whole unprocessed foods, more fermented foods, get the antibiotics out of there, get the GMOs out of there, get back to the real stuff, the sunshine, the grass, the good CLA, the good omega-3s, back to the foods, because health is not associated with more frequent visits to a doctor, and how many more bottles of pills you can take. It is associated with foundational foods, whole unprocessed foods. That's the bottom line. It's always been that way. It will probably be that way into the future, that hopefully. Food is the foundation of health. I mean, Hippocrates said that 2,400 years ago, that food be your medicine and medicine be your food. So this is quite a disruption because we're taking the processors out of the food chain, going from farmer to the consumer, and that makes a farmer a different kind of farmer. He goes out and makes speeches to the co-op in Columbia, and that makes harder questions for the farmer too. It's a different world. The farmer's paid differently. It's job creation. We got 65 employees at Organic Pastures Dairy. 65 employees. A normal 400 cow dairy would have 2 or 3 employees total. We have 65, including truck driving and everything else. We have other dairies coming to us saying, can you distribute our products? Rosa Dairy, Rosa Brothers, who has a great product, but it's pasteurized. It's a flavored product. But at least they broke the crowd and did something on their own. It's unhomogenized, pasteurized, minimally pasteurized, and they put in A&W Ripper flavor or something. They're selling like hotcakes in glass jars. Anyway, it's like dessert. They want to get on our trucks. So it's kind of an emerging, people are doing their best to get out of the dairy thing and kind of evolve into what they can do to connect to people and be a better solution for people. There's a lot of cheesemakers that want to get on our truck. So we're actually starting to change things. We're no longer the big corporate guys, but now we're more of a grace, owned by the farmer, consumer directed. Because when I hear comments from consumers, I take that back as golden truths. When you stand across the farmer's market table and they tell you, I don't want GMO, and I want this, and I want that, or your product did this, or your product did that, I take that as truly important feedback. A farmer that does pasteurized stuff doesn't ever get that, unless he does it himself, and maybe he gets the feedback. And Rosa's the first one to say, you know what, hats off to you. We aren't going to do fluid milk, because we can't do it. We have to add sugar to ours to sell it, because, you know, we can't do what you do. We got to pasteurize it. There was another question here? Yes?
Are you able to get this kind of information, or how is this information getting into our universities and colleges so that?
With a crowbar.
Well, I'm just wondering, because I know that at Shasta Community College, they recently, they now have a degree in sustainable agriculture. And I know that the sustainable stuff is moving into the colleges and universities, but
Chico State University.
What's happening with raw milk, or
Yep.
at least dairy
Chico State
practices?
University has an organic dairy up there. Dr. Cindy Daly runs it.
Yeah, I know.
And, okay, well, she hosted our Raw Milk Institute training day this last August. And she stood up in front of a crowd of 110 farmers and said, I love raw milk. It's a professor on a university campus who said, I love raw milk, and I love everything about it. It's fantastic. I'm a cheerleader for it. We can't do it here because the politics are too thick. We got our 75 cows, and we're going to do some cheeses and this and that and the other thing. But I'll tell you what, she said it. And Dr. Bruce German from UC Davis, bless his heart, he's the guy who founded the International Milk Genomics Consortium, which can't speak of raw milk, but we can talk about breast milk all day, because of the politics of the money that comes from the dairy industry to support his programs. But they published a splash newsletter. He came and spoke at that conference and talked about how critical it was that we eat better, and the good bacteria. Didn't mention raw milk, but he spoke in front of the raw milk producers. So, I mean, you got to deduct something from that, right?
Still has his job.
He still has his job, but he's 63, 64 years old, and you know he's